Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and one of our last episodes for 2023, which is Star Wars books, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the bad I'm going to be renaming in this instance to the meh, because, that's two categories of negativity I don't think we need. So this is for a good episode for anyone who's like looking to read a Star Wars book, anyone who's thinking of buying a Star Wars book for a Christmas gift, a late Christmas gift perhaps, whenever this episode drops, who knows. Maybe you want to read more books next year. Might be a New Year's resolution. It's a good time to talk about this stuff. So, we got Francis, we got Blake. Let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
Well, hello, welcome back.
Chut Josh.
Chut Blake. We got our friend Francis with us as well. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So first time being in the escape pod, not hologramming away from another system somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Good to have you aboard the escape pod with us today.
Good to be on board. Shame I'm not piloting, but
Well, the escape pod, we just kind of.
Oh yeah, no one pilots this machine. We just kind of float in space and we never get anywhere.
That's why we have all these endless shows. There's nothing else to do. We just kind of ramble on.
Now, the last time anyone intercepted our transmissions was a while ago, but hey, we're getting one now.
Star Wars Escape Pod has just been intercepted by the Separatist Alliance. If you are tuning in right now, don't go anywhere. Leave a review and make it a good one.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Venturous. Okay, cool. So we're talking about Star Wars books today, and this is kind of an exciting topic because lots of people are somewhat unaware, I find sometimes, of the premise of Star Wars books, and I don't want to get in too deep into that, but just real quick, compared to other multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar franchises out there that have a big fan following, it's worth knowing that Star Wars has this big, huge web of canonicity, in terms of the story continuity, so on and so forth.
Is it still, though?
And, compared to other things, like, it is as much as you can, right? Some people out there might be confused because, like, when I say I keep reading all these Star Wars books, they're like, how do you keep reading? They're in their mind, they're like maybe thinking of novelizations, like adaptions, stuff like that. And I've always found myself explaining, like, no, these are stories that take place in the continuity of the greater saga of things, right? Like with new characters and behind the scenes characters, maybe characters that showed up once in a movie or an animated show or a live action show. And this is like a story all about them kind of taking place at the same time as other things, right? And it's kind of a weird concept for them because like that usually only happens when you have like so many different comic books all simultaneously kind of telling different stories at the same time period. But rarely does it happen when you have movies, animated shows, live action shows, books, audiobooks, video games, all kind of in one stack like that. It's like it doesn't happen.
I mean, you could argue that's kind of what George Lucas did originally. It's just there's like tiers of canonicity, right? So it was canon until disproven by George, essentially.
I guess. Well, he never looked at the books as canon, and he said that. Like Davis said that. He's just like, he's pretty much said like, okay, any of the stuff that he did, he saw it, but he never really acknowledged that it was going to be part of his. It's not his Star Wars, right? It never was. But now that Disney owns Star Wars, that was kind of why they hit the reset button, and they did this whole initiative where all the previous Star Wars content, games, books, etc., were also, minus the Clone Wars, was all kind of erased from the canonicity, and they just sort of reset sort of the storytelling, so that way they could make their movies the way they wanted to make them, not adhere to any previously made books, any of that stuff, and so on and so forth. So, and here we are all these years later, almost, I think it's been about 10 years now since Disney acquired the company. We've got 10 years of canon content behind us now.
Which is crazy. I mean, I'm impressed I've kept it this consistent.
Yeah.
Especially with the amount of comics. So like video games, you can argue there hasn't actually been enough to cause any issues.
I'm looking at you, EA.
Yeah, it's been a bit lackluster on the games front over the last decade, which is unfortunate. But comics have been insane. And I feel like novels as well, but not to the same extent, where I know Josh, you and I were trying to collect all the novels at one point when they're first coming out, get the hardcovers. And it became so many, and we just couldn't keep up anymore.
Yeah, well, I have a small, limited selection left. At one point I ended up selling and returning a lot of the books that I had acquired, which used to... I almost had the IKEA Calyx thing, 5 cubbies across. I almost had that whole thing filled up with books.
Wow.
The whole thing. And I sold and returned things, and because some things I hadn't even read. Like I bought it just for the sake of I'll read it eventually. But it was so much that I just accumulated so much of this stuff. And I was like, I haven't even cracked the spine on this guy. I'll just take it back to the bookstore, see what I can get.
Which is funny because people talk about the movies with Star Wars fatigue, but it's the
books.
Yeah,
it's the books and the comics.
That was it for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way because when Disney was making a lot of the comic books, I remember reading so much of the Darth Vader stuff coming out and so much of all the elaborated stories on what was happening between the movies.
Yeah,
but there was just so much. I fell behind so hard. Even now, I'm still trying to catch up on Darth Vader.
No, and Vader's one of the better ones. That's worth catching up on. I think the main series is supposed to be decent, but there was a lot of spin-off stuff as well that for a while I kind of just feel like Disney was just making content for the sake of making content, which is why this podcast has been really good because we're gonna filter through all that for you.
Yeah, and we've done a few book reviews in the past. In fact, I think I made a Spotify playlist at one point with all our book reviews on it, and so if anyone's curious of rifling through there's not too many. I think we've maybe got 10 at this point, maybe a bit less. I don't know, maybe 10, something like that. But
we read a lot before we started the podcast, I think.
Yeah. We've read a lot as the years have gone. I grew up reading a lot of the Scholastic, the Jedi Quest series, the Jedi Apprentice, Last of the Jedi, stuff like that.
But even the canon stuff I'm talking about with the post Clone Wars novels, for example.
Yeah.
And, Lost Stars and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Those as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of that post, a lot of the Disney stuff, we've read it, we've consumed a decent amount of it. So what we've got going on today is, for anyone listening, is we're cutting to the chase. We're getting into sort of just, we're going to each bring up 3 good books that we've read, 3 sort of meh book that we've read, and 3 sort of bad, ugly books that we've read. Things that you should avoid buying for someone, perhaps, and these are all just our own opinions, but, if you're looking to get into Star Wars books, we've got some recommendations to get into and to not. So we'll start with the good. Just so for those of you looking for a quick information on those Christmas gifts, we'll start with that. I'm going to throw one out there. Maybe you guys have it shared on your list as well. It is it's not a canon book. It's a Legends book, and it is called Darth Plagueis.
Yeah, that was the first one I wrote down.
This is 2 on mine.
Yeah, this is usually in the top 3 of most lists, and it has for good reason, right? This book is tremendously amazing. It's written by James Luceno. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I think it's Luceno.
Luceno. And what I'll do is I'll just read a small prologue. The novel begins just after Darth Sidious kills his Sith master Darth Plagueis. The Sith Lord experiences a moment where he feels a dramatic shift in the Force, which promises him that the dark side shall control him as much as he controls it. So that's the prologue, and but the book actually kind of flashes back before that event and goes to cuts back 35 years with Darth Plagueis and his master Darth Tenebrous, and you see the exchange between Plagueis and Tenebrous Tenebrous as Tenebrous bites the dust, like right away. And so like right away, Plagueis, he's looking for an apprentice and stuff, and he's got this whole grand plan that he's like putting together. And it turns out that the plan of Sidious's, to rule the galaxy in a very political standpoint is actually also Plagueis's plan, and that's kind of worked into the plot. And I love the fact that this book overlaps with the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool, and just adds so much extra context what's going on.
Oh yeah, you see a young Jedi Dooku. You see so much stuff, so much cool stuff. There's conversations about Anakin, and it alludes to sort of why he was born, with Plagueis playing around with his like life experiments and stuff like that. It kind of alludes to the fact that the Force is like fighting back and like, sort of activates the prophecy of the Chosen One because of all that stuff. There's so much cool stuff in this book. And I just feel like it's just in the top 3 like all the time,
It makes me question why Dave hasn't pulled from this specifically to bring into canon, because he's pulled a lot of golden nuggets from a lot of the EU stuff, but no one's touched any Plagueis stuff, and I really can't help but wonder why.
That's a good point. You really should. It was really interesting reading about how Plagueis was around during the Phantom Menace.
Yep, you never guessed that.
Right? It was so cool just learning the fact that he was still there pulling all the strings, and we never would have known this without this book.
And he was very involved with the banking clan, because we find out he was a Moon, which also really helps set up what's kind of going on with the Clone Wars and how they got that off the ground. So this book just filled in so many gaps for the prequels.
We also saw Maul's introduction to the story in this as well. I feel like one of the downsides of reading a Star Wars book that is not canon is you don't get the small tie-ins with the greater story, because a lot of what has been written is mostly down to the author and some people working at Lucasfilm at the time, Leland Chee and stuff, who were people that were kind of more or less lore masters within the company, but that wasn't really their full-time job, the Mother Talzin, who is sort of an influential person in Maul's life, in the canon, she's his mother, and she, I don't believe, is mentioned once in this book, right? So there is some inconsistencies. So it's not a canon book by any means whatsoever, but the greater story of this legend, if you will, excellent, and that's why it's the top of my list.
Have you ever heard of the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Not a story the Jedi would tell you.
But you can read it here. Click this Amazon link.
Exactly. Yeah. That's another thing. I will link all of these books down in the description. So if you're using a podcast app that uses hyperlinks, you should be able to just click the text, and it should magically bring you to a web page. If you're not using an app that's compatible with that, then rest in peace. All right. So Francis, maybe we can go to you. Like, what's on your top 3 list? What do you have?
Well, on the topic of the early days of the prequels, I have Dark Disciple.
Oh yeah,
if you're familiar with that one.
You're reading from that's also on my top 3 list. So we're getting through this quick.
Am I secretly screen peeking?
Yeah, I think it's we're all in sync here.
But I remember loving reading more about Ventress and how she actually Quinlan Vos.
Quinlan Vos.
Yeah. And I just loved reading about their relationship and just how she grew and evolved as a character, and how much Quinlan really affected her. Yeah.
Is this on your top 3? I'm curious.
No, because my top 3 is actually top 5. I can add the 6th book.
Oh man, dude, right. We got to cut that one short then. I'll read this opening crawl for this book just so people kind of know what it's about. For years, the galaxy-wide conflict known as the Clone Wars has raged. The struggle between the rightful government of the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems has claimed the lives of untold billions. The Force-wielding Jedi, for millennia, the guardians of peace in the galaxy, have been thwarted at nearly every turn by the Separatists and their leader, the Sith Lord Count Dooku. With the war showing no signs of ending and the casualties mounting each day, the Jedi must consider every possible means of defeating their cunning foe. Whether some means are too unthinkable and some allies too untrustworthy has yet to be revealed. Something that's really interesting about this book is that it is adapted from 8 unproduced Clone Wars episodes. And back when Clone Wars was first canceled, they did this thing called Clone Wars Legacy. And it was a bit of a multimedia project. Multimedia meaning stuff you can watch, stuff you can read, stuff you can look at. And a lot of these, so a lot of people don't know that, Clone Wars was supposed to go for 8 seasons. And the full 8-season story had been written out already. Brent Friedman, who's one of the writers on the show, has confirmed this. And they've talked about it at numerous conventions and celebrations, revealing a bit more as to kind of things that we missed out on. Eventually, of course, Disney went and resurrected Clone Wars again, and we ended up getting thrown a bone from the constant pestering of let's finish this show.
It's mostly just Josh tweeting at them incessantly.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't claim credit for most. I mean, there are thousands, if not thousands, of people out there wanting that show back, and they gave us 12. Is that right? 12 episodes for season 7 or something like that.
That sounds right.
I think it's 3 arcs of 4.
Yeah. So we at least got half a season worth of content, but there's an entire season and a half worth of stories that people didn't get to see. One of these story arcs was the Dark Disciple story arc, and it's 8 episodes, all fully adapted into a novel, which counts towards the Clone Wars. So if you've watched the whole Clone Wars, you'll be a big fan of this book because it is literally from the pages of scripts for Clone Wars episodes that just they didn't have time to finish before the show was canceled. And it's completely about Ventress and her storyline and finishing her storyline because she doesn't show up anymore after the Clone Wars. So a lot of people are like, where the heck did she go?
It's true. She just vanished.
What happened to her, right? And this book tells that story.
So I'm trying to remember her progression. So it's in the show, after she's Dooku's apprentice, she turns bounty hunter, and then
she turns Night Sister first.
Sorry, Night Sister until Grievous shows up,
kills them all.
Yeah, on Death.
Yeah, and then she goes full bounty hunter.
And that's kind of where her story ended.
Yeah,
until we got this book.
Pretty much. Yeah.
She basically said, "Hi, Kenobi. Bye, Kenobi."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So as you would expect, this Clone Wars book is as rooted in Clone Wars as you would expect. We have every character that has popped up in Clone Wars pretty much show up in this book. Quinlan Vos is also a big part of the story. So if you liked his surfer dude personality, his kind of ladies man sort of charm, him and Asajj Ventress kind of have a little thing going. And I really liked this book a lot. So the episodes that are in this book are called Lethal Alliance, The Mission, Conspirators, Dark Disciple, Saving Vos Part 1, Saving Vos Part 2, Traitor, and The Path. This novel was written by Christy Golden, and definitely on the top of my list.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, so Quinlan Vos was a character that was a background character in Phantom Menace, and they made a comic about him, and he struggled with turning to the dark side. I think he turned dark for a while in the comic, and they redid that in this novel. Yeah,
so that's an old Dark Horse comic series, the Star Wars Clone Wars comic book series, way back, when the 2D micro series came out, and Dark Horse was doing these comic books kind of based on that, but way darker.
So was it the same lineup as the original Darth Maul Robot Legs revival? Because that was Dark Horse.
That was also Dark Horse, not the same series, but it was also Dark Horse. But that was a while ago. So that's all Legend stuff. So it was cool that they brought back that character, and got to see more of him on screen and stuff. And they would have highlighted him in this book. So in these episodes. So luckily we can read about it. I'm surprised it's not on your top list.
To be honest, I forgot about it until it's in this room, but before we started the podcast.
Nice.
So we hadn't even talked about it yet. I was like, write that book.
Okay. Well, that's a big one. Thanks, Francis, for bringing that one up. So we skipped down half my list as well. So Blake, what's one of your top 3?
So first one was Plagueis. We talked about that. The next one, I sort of cheated, and instead of picking one book, I just put the Thrawn trilogy.
That's fair. Yeah, that's so fair.
Fair enough.
If you read one, you got to read all of them. But the first one's called Heir to the Empire.
So this is a Legends, just so people know what to look for.
Yes, this is Legends. It's Timothy Zahn, one of his earlier novels in the Star Wars universe. Many of the fan favorite EU characters are actually from this series, like Mara Jade and Thrawn. It's got the so hated lizards with the ability to repel the Force, which everyone has always hated ever since. Dave Filoni has actually been quoted saying getting rid of the weird stuff when he talks about recanonizing some of this. So this is a notorious series and super highly recommended to check out. So it actually takes place right after Return of the Jedi, and
9 years after the Battle of Yavin. So about the same time that The Mandalorian takes place.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this was the original post Return of the Jedi storyline. And as Mandalorian has been coming out in the new canon, it seems like they're pulling some ideas from it. For example, bringing Thrawn back.
Yeah.
So I know myself, I'm excited to see if they're
Also,
gonna
other
stick close to
characters like Pelion, who's now shown up in
That's right.
in Mandalorian as well. In like season 3 now, he's shown up. So as a Imperial.
They brought him back in an earlier novel, didn't they? Wasn't he in Aftermath or something?
Oh, you're right. Actually, he did show up in a book though.
was a
Like
book.
first time on screen. Like a lot of stuff from this old Thrawn trilogy that they've sort of resurrected for screen. In live action, because like we did get Thrawn in Rebels, and that was really cool too. But for a lot of people who wouldn't have that exposure to the animated shows, like maybe animated series just aren't their thing, right? They would have watched Ahsoka or Mandalorian and kind of gone like, oh, like who's this guy? Like when did he become a part of Star Wars? And like whatever, maybe.
I think he's new, but he's actually a Legends character.
Yeah, like this character was first come up with so this is Timothy Zahn trilogy. This first book was published in 1991. So he's been in the Star Wars lore for a while.
That's the thing. So this series actually came out in the Dark Times, what fans refer to as the Dark Times, which was after the original trilogy, but before the prequels. There really wasn't a lot of Star Wars material coming out. And post Return of the Jedi, I think it was virtually nothing for several years. And this novel series got a lot of people back into the Star Wars as a kind of a medium again. And it really ramped up, I feel like, the idea of keeping Star Wars at the forefront of people's psyche as far as leading up directly into the prequels.
Yeah. Why should people read these books? If they're not kind of like Plagueis, like if they're not canon anymore, why should people read these books?
Because they're good.
They're
fantastic.
legendary books, and like even if they don't have a lot to relevance-wise to do with current stories, it's worth reading stories that have sort of a little bit of roots, with stuff that they're going to do.
Yeah.
So like this. So like, I'm just going to read a small section here. This trilogy follows the campaign of Imperial Grand Admiral Thrawn from the destruction of the Eloman Task Force to the Battle of Bilbringi, and also recounts the efforts of Dark Jedi Joruus C'baoth and his efforts to claim Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa Solo, and her children as his apprentices. So like that pretty much has nothing to do with anything we've seen in canon, but it introduced kind of a cool concept of a dark Jedi, and that is something we've now seen with Baylan Skoll and his apprentice.
This also has the original cloned Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Luke
introduced Force cloning. It also introduced Thrawn. Just a bunch of different stuff. But what's important is if you ever read any Legends book ever, which takes place after Return of the Jedi, it's based in the continuity of this trilogy, right? So like Leia's story, Luke's story, Han and Leia's kids, which in the Legends continuity is Jason and Jaina Solo, and then eventually there's Anakin Solo as well. There's a lot of kind of relevance to reading those sort of original storylines and kind of seeing the inspiration for where things I guess ended up. But
exactly.
Very very good stories, very respected by a lot of Star Wars fans. So
it really helped explain what happened to the Empire after Return of the Jedi, where it's still a massive force. It's just now lacking leadership. So it kind of splinters off into separate groups, and they become almost like there's a term for it, but they basically break off into like, so it's different war territories, and they're all smaller leaders fighting each other internally. And then how the New Republic starts to reclaim all the territory owned by the Empire in this point in time, where they're in kind of a disarray. Until Thrawn comes back and is able to start reuniting all the clans.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion to read those three. I'm at the end of my list, which happens to be one that I didn't expect to put on, but I put it on because I was like,
hold on.
What the heck?
I don't think we should do all the good first. I think we should cycle through. So you should now do a bad or a meh.
No. We're doing the good first.
No, people are just gonna listen to the start of the podcast and then leave.
No. It's for the Christmas gifts, right? They want their.
You're gonna buy a bad book for someone. Why would you do that?
We're talking about them anyways. Okay, so the last one on my list, it's Brotherhood. It was published by Del Rey. Author was Mike Shen. I didn't expect to put this one on my list, but it was so good, and I just had to put it on my list because it is a Clone Wars based novel. Really brought me back to those growing up books, those Jedi Quest, Jedi Adventure kind of stories. Really fills in some gaps with Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars having this weird like gap of like nothing for like a couple months or weeks or however long it's been. Because if you start watching Clone Wars chronologically, Anakin's already got like semi-long hair and everything, and a scar, and it's like, dude, like what happened? Like there, there's like how much time has gone by, So I just thought like this was a really almost essential book, which kind of just nailed the characters incredibly well. And it nailed that like prequel vibe Jedi duo between Master and Apprentice, like super nicely. And it told a story that I just really couldn't get enough of. I was like, man, this is great. Like, this is just such a good Star Wars book. So that's a newer one. It's canon. It's semi-relevant if you're, looking to fill some holes in kind of your head canon kind of thing. It's a good one. It's a good one. So I'll read a quick plot summary here. The Clone Wars have erupted, caught off guard by the quickly expanding conflict. The overwhelmed Jedi Order has rushed to the advancement of Padawans to better integrate into the Grand Army of the Republic and assist the war effort. Newly promoted Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker is increasingly torn between his growing duties to the Republic and his secret marriage to the Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo. With his knighting, his mentor Obi-Wan Kenobi has been elevated to the Jedi Council under the rank of Master, and as dark forces push the Jedi further toward their transformation of the Guardians to soldiers, Anakin and Obi-Wan find themselves on equal footing, yet opposing paths, each pondering the meaning of peace and justice during a wartime. The Cato Nemoidia reference in episode 3 is also a big part of this story as well, so that was kind of cool to see.
That's one thing I love that they do is they'll take like a throwaway line from one of the movies and make a whole novel about something.
It's like a whole book, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of Clone Wars, Clone Wars and also Rebels, where a lot of the big arcs and Rebels were just throwaway lines from the original movies, like when they went out and found where all the Y-wings were, where they found out how to build the B-wings and how to make basically the whole fleet for the Rebels. Yeah,
That's a good point. It also explains why they're called the Rebel Alliance, because they were several cells that then formed an alliance, because it didn't really make a lot of sense before that.
Yeah, true.
So I forget, did you guys read Brotherhood or no?
Yeah, I think you and I did a review.
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
I don't think I have.
Yeah. It's worth reading. Yeah.
I'll add that to my list.
Francis, what you got next on your? I think you're on the last one now too, right? Because Plagueis and Darth Disciple were both our shared ones.
Well, I also cheated and had I have a top 5.
Yeah, okay, I did 5 as well. So
it was hard to pick 3.
The other 2 could be notable mentions.
The other book is also a bit of a cheat choice.
Nice.
The Darth Bane trilogy.
Oh man, Darth Bane. Those are ones I have not read.
I've picked that one up at the bookstore so many times and then just never pulled the trigger.
What?
I know. There's just so many other things to read.
But it's so good. Like it elaborates on Darth Bane's rule of 2, and there's a lot of callbacks to the Old Republic and how he did research on the Sith of the past, like Revan, and it really shows the early days of the Sith and what they turn into today.
Yeah, I mean they needed some sort of explanation how they went from this armada of Sith, kind of equivalent to the Jedi Order, down to just these just a master and apprentice working in the shadows.
Yeah.
So Drew Karpshin is the guy who wrote these books. And another good reason to read these ones is even though they are legends, they're so far in the past, with the story that there's really not a lot of conflicting canon elements that would run in badly with these stories.
It's kind of pseudo canon because Bane did show up for one moment
in Clone Wars. Yeah, so he shows up as a bit of a weird allusion to Yoda on Moraband or Korriban or whatever you want to call it. And it was in the Yoda arc in season 6, and he showed up, but he would look different.
He looked like Shredder from Ninja Turtles.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. I don't really know how I feel about that still. What's interesting though is Mark Hamill voiced him.
What?
Yeah. So that was
a cool cameo.
That was kind of a cool cameo. So Mark Hamill's in the Clone Wars, everybody. Yeah.
For one quick moment.
One quick moment. We got more of him in that show than in episode 7.
Too soon.
Ouch. Suck it, JJ. Okay, yeah. So that's no, it's a great mention. I don't see a plot summary here, but yeah, Rule 2, Darth Bane. Got anything more to add?
I mean, that's basically what the trilogy is about. It's just how he goes from the leader of this one cell of the Sith and realizing that looking around him, everyone's just trying to take each other down, and there is no real order with the Sith at the time. And it's just him coming to the realization that we're screwed if we stay in a big group. We need to have smaller numbers. And it's his story of discovering that and establishing the new Sith. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Blake, what you got? What's your next one?
So the next one is actually my only canon book on the good side here. And I put Lost Stars because I remember being very pleasantly surprised because I think it was a young adult novel.
It is, yeah.
And it came out at the same time as the Aftermath trilogy. And I was quite disappointed with that, which we'll get into later. And then this book came out, and I wasn't expecting much, and then I really liked it. And the basic premise is it's kind of a Romeo and Juliet book. But hold on a moment, let me explain before you turn off the podcast here. So it's about these two. There's two kids. There's a boy and a girl, and they grow up in this small town. And it's right around the time where they find out that the Jedi betrayed the Republic and the Empire is formed. So as they grow up, they join they sign up with the Empire, and one of them defects, becomes a rebel. And then they're on opposing sides of the war, and it's kind of following their storylines and how they cross each other from both sides of the war itself, which is actually really fascinating to kind of see basically both political sides of what's going on in this era.
Yeah.
That is very Romeo Juliet.
Yeah.
It's well summarized. It's easy to read, like easy on the eyes, no words tripping you up because it's a young adult novel, right? Like it's,
This book, let me tell you, it is easy on the eyes.
It's easy on the eyes. Yeah. Easy on the brain. I didn't need to look up words, It's written by Claudia Gray, and yeah, it was fantastic. It was really good.
It was of the early books that came out, this was hands down the best, and that's why Claudia Gray has gotten several novels from
I knew this was going to be on your list, and that's part of the reason why I put Brotherhood on mine.
Okay.
Because it was up there,
Yeah, I was wondering if you have that on there or not.
Yeah.
I was worried we'd all just have the same list.
That's why I switched it up. I think 2 out of 3 for one shared item is enough for me.
Fair enough.
Francis, what you got else on your good list?
Another one on my good list was the Master and Apprentice novel.
Oh yeah. So
Qui-Gon and
before you
Kenobi.
continue with that, this is the book that I think I may have mentioned this before we hit record, but this is the book that I started reading. I was super into it. I absolutely loved it. I was digging it so hard.
This is it?
And then I just stopped. I got so busy with just life stuff, working. A couple months went by, and then I felt the need to restart the book from the beginning because I couldn't quite remember stuff well enough to continue reading. And then I just never got around to that because something else kind of took my attention away, and it's been on my list ever since. So I read about half the book, and I loved it. I loved whatever, but I can't put it on my list because I never finished it, but it would have been on my list if I'd had. So I love that you're bringing this up. Carry on.
But I love this book because I think certain plot points of it got adapted into a comic series because it's the first time that that Obi-Wan meets Duchess Satine, yeah. And I don't know, I just really love the book because why haven't you read it?
This is also a Claudia Gray book. So same author who wrote Lost Stars wrote this book.
Clearly, she knows what she's doing.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, the book's just about Qui-Gon and I keep wanting to say Kenobi. Obi-Wan's relationship and how close they were as master and apprentice and as more like brothers. And yeah, it was just also really nice seeing how quippy and how witty Satine was with Obi-Wan, and yeah, just the way their relationship kind of grew, developed, and how they adapted that into the Clone Wars.
What I really like was the ties that it had to Clone Wars. Even in addition to that, there was mentions about Teth. I think the beginning of the book or something. They go to Teth, and that was. If anyone's watched the theatrical release for Clone Wars, they're on this very purpley, dusty, rocky planet called Teth, and there's a big monastery there, and smugglers and huts and stuff kind of have hideouts all over the place. So it was a cool world and we never really saw again. And I liked the idea of this landscape. It was just something we just hadn't really seen before, and very rarely revisited. It was revisited once later in the show, but yeah, I love the book that takes place here. Very good book. Very good book.
So I'm trying trying to remember if I've read this book or if I'm just getting it mixed up with the Count Dooku
Maybe.
audio, radio storytelling, whatever thing.
There were some crossovers, some ties between Master and Apprentice and Dooku Jedi Lost with characters like Rail,
Okay.
which was Dooku's first apprentice.
That's right.
And Dooku was also in the book, I think.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
So, because I'm trying to remember in this novel that we're talking about, is there a lot of scenes where Obi-Wan thinks Qui-Gon doesn't want him as an apprentice?
Yes.
Okay, so I have read it. Okay.
Right.
I'm like, as you're talking about it, I'm like vaguely remembering.
Yeah. They struggle. They at first they kind of, that's part of the story, is like they struggle.
They don't see
to-
eye to eye.
No,
Yeah.
he struggles to kind of see their symbiotic relationship, right?
And it's also a lot about Qui-Gon being Dooku's apprentice and being obsessed with the Chosen One lore, which he finds out in a holocron that Dooku was studying.
Prophecies, yeah, it really gets into prophecies a
Prophecies,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, and that's sort of an area where Dooku Jedi Lost excelled as well. Was like the whole kind of prophecy obsessions and Sifo-Dyas. But yeah, great book, great bringing that up.
I forgot about that one too. That was a good one.
Blake, you're next. Your last next.
I got this one and one more.
Okay, all right,
But Francis has one more as well, so we'll go back and forth.
sure, sounds good.
On the positives. My next one, I'm surprised you didn't have this on here, Josh, is Republic Commando.
Yeah, I absolutely love, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the game to death. The books, I liked the first one, and I liked the fourth one.
Admittedly, I'm putting this down for the first book. The first book was really good. Then second was okay. I feel like each book was like a step down.
So the first book is called Hard Contact, Republic Commando. It's written by Karen Travis. For those who need to know, it's also a Legends story.
Yeah.
Carry on.
And is entirely from the clones' perspective, except I guess there's a few chapters from the one Jedi who joins them. But for me, this is one of the first books I got into that really got into like the soldiers' perspective, what was going on, especially in the Clone Wars, which I found was super cool. And it really fleshed out these kind of random Navy SEAL-esque clone troopers that they kind of came out of nowhere with the Clone Commando game. And then there's like, after the novels, I think they decided to do one cameo appearance in Clone Wars, and now they're kind of in the background of all the Bad Batch episodes.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat seeing that fleshed out. And the design of the Commandos is just super cool. Even though if you're in a stealth mission, having a glowing mask is probably a bad idea.
Terrible.
Yeah, the first book actually came out a couple months prior to the release of the game.
I'm also forgetting about Gregor, which had his own semi-arc.
Yeah, Gregor was kind of the highlight character, I think, of most of the series. But the book came out in 2004 in October, and the game, which sort of got me introduced to Republic Commandos, came out in 2005 in March. So I feel like they kind of sort of timed it properly. You know, it's like, okay, we're doing a book, we're doing a game, we're kind of doing all this stuff. Elite clones, I love it.
And it really fleshed out the kind of the clone tiering and how they were all trained by Mandalorians. Specifically, the Commandos were trained by Mandalorians, where the regular soldiers were kind of taught by whoever, just random military contractors.
Yeah.
But there was like a predecessor. What am I thinking of? Yeah,
Predecessor. Yeah.
thank you. Yes, that. Of a clone Gen Alpha, which had more genetic manipulations. They were like super soldiers, even more so than the Commandos, which are toned down. But they were so independent that they were hard to control in a military setting, which is why they decided not to make more. And you see a number of these specific clones show up in the original animated series. I think it was kind of based on that.
Those
Like,
were
they
the
pulled from
original ARC troopers.
Yeah, exactly.
Before the idea of ARC changed into just kind of
a
promotion.
like a promotion of some kind. Yeah.
So originally they were these super soldiers.
Yeah, and there was like very few of them.
And they're all very, very engulfed in Mandalorian culture.
And by super, you don't mean like Bad Batch level superpowers. Like you just mean like very skilled,
independent,
very skilled.
And very, very skilled. But they also were slightly genetically manipulated to be. It's not the same level as Bad Batch, where they all have like a unique thing. But they were smarter, a little stronger, kind of basically like the Master Chief. Of clones, just not quite to that extent either.
Right.
You can't flip over a tank.
If I recall, wasn't Rex one of them? But he wasn't one that was indoctrinated into the Mandalorian culture as much.
Rex's design is based on one of those ARC troopers. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Because I remember reading somewhere that he was some sort of alpha trooper, and that's why he's more individual than a lot of other troopers that Anakin's encountered. Like, he's so much more of a free thinker than anyone else that he's led.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe some of those traits of the character probably come from that original design in the Legends. But again, it's the Legends material here making its way into canon, and this is what it's all about, the roots, right?
And it also, this series, so the first book is the best one, but the series did also help explain the original reason why the clones all turned on the Jedi before they added the brain chip storyline. So they've changed the canon around that point, but I actually like what this series did better than what's canon currently. I don't know if I should explain that, so I'll just let you read the novel.
Yeah.
And it also has the first clone Jedi hybrid, as in a Jedi and a clone get together and have a kid who becomes a Force-sensitive clone.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
Yeah. Well, don't worry, because Lego Star Wars has recanonized that in the Lego lore.
Nice.
They did?
Yeah, there's a whole thing about this, a Force-sensitive clone trooper.
Francis,
Lego's sat around it too.
You got one more on your good list here.
Well, I don't think I need to mention it anymore because it's also Republic Commandos.
Is it?
Yes.
Which one?
I'm going to throw a bone to Death Troopers.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about that one. That was also really good.
Yeah.
That's because I listened to the audiobook version of that one, and that's the only novel I've ever listened to where I almost fainted while on transit. Because it was in the audiobook, they have all these kind of gross, kind of squishy noises and stuff, because it's a zombie novel.
Yeah.
It's about stormtroopers basically being raised to the death through Sith alchemy and stuff. There's like a virus. And when I was riding trans, I got faint and I had to sit down and I was on my way to the airport and I had to sit on my bag because I almost passed out in the middle of the train. That's how good the audiobook version is. So listen to the audiobook of this.
So this book is written by Joe Schreiber, and it came out in, when was this, 2009. So it was a while ago, but also a Legends book, and it takes place about a year before A New Hope. And like you heard, I mean, if you like Star Wars, if you like zombies, is where it originates, and I'm sure you love seeing actual Death Troopers in Ahsoka when those pops up.
That was really cool.
Yeah, because I think when all of us saw Rogue One, and there was a new type of stormtrooper that showed up in that movie, which was the Death Trooper, and they're black armor, they have the neon green highlights to them and stuff, and they look pretty sweet, but they're very much alive, and I think a lot of us are like, oh well, that's kind of a lame way to work in the name of the Death Trooper into it's like whatever. I didn't really care much for the title until most recently when they made Death Trooper Death Troopers.
That's right, Dead Death Troopers
in Ahsoka, and I was like, yes, like. Finally, that
was probably the highlight of the whole series for me. When Ahsoka smashes Sabine smashes the face mask of the one Death Trooper, and you get the zombie mouth coming out. Yeah, super cool.
That was super awesome. Yeah, trying to eat her.
Yeah.
Hear the teeth chattering. Yeah,
so good, man.
It's good. Yeah. Thanks for the mention on that one as well.
Probably not, in my opinion. Maybe you disagree, Francis, but I don't think the prequel's worth reading. I really couldn't get into it as much. The original novel, though, was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
So the author has something to say about it, and he says if you were a child in the 70s who grew up with the original Star Wars trilogy and really digs horror in the vein of The Shining and Alien with a little dose of William Gibson mixed in, this is for you. So
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Blake, is that your last one?
I got one more. And this one,
uno más.
It's hard for me to actually put a number to all the books that I've shared, and this one falls in there too. So I'm reading it last on my good list, but you could really say any of these in any order. And my last one is Scoundrels. It's another Timothy Zahn novel, and this one is a heist novel around Han Solo and him getting a crew together. Lando's there and Chewie's there. Usually I'm not a big fan of the novels that are bringing in all the characters from the movies, but I thought this one did a really good job.
So this is a post-episode 4 book in the Legends continuity, and it was written by Timothy Zahn, like you say. Came out 2013. That was the same year that Disney bought the company. I remember this one when it came out. It was like one of the last canon books.
Non-canon,
sorry. Yeah. One of the last non-canon books.
Just missed it.
Yeah.
Is there an excerpt there? Would mind if you just
I'm just looking for one here. So there's a plot. What is it? There's a plot summary. I don't see a
is there like
prelude.
or like the back of the novel? That's what we should be reading.
Yeah.
Anyone able to do an impression of the narrator from the Clone Wars?
I can do a really bad one, but I'm not going to do it for this because it's too
Just
much
hit the
text. Just hit the button. All right. Here we go.
Star Wars Escape Pod is the Republic's choice of podcast anywhere in the galaxy. Leave a stellar review and tune in each week for more.
There we go. Thanks you, Lauren.
I wish one of us was able to do it so we could read the preludes. Just
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be
the
good.
Clone
yeah.
Wars have exploded.
Han Solo should be basking in his moment of glory. After all, the cocky smuggler and captain of the Millennium Falcon just played a key role in the daring raid that just destroyed the Death Star and landed the first serious blow to the Empire in its war against the Rebel Alliance. But after losing the reward his heroics earned him, Han's got nothing to celebrate, especially since he's deep in debt to the ruthless crime lord Jabba the Hutt. There's a bounty on Han's head, and if he can't cough up the credits, he'll surely pay with his hide. The only thing that can save him is a king's ransom, or maybe a gangster's fortune. That's what a mysterious stranger is offering in exchange for Han's less than legal help with a riskier than usual caper. The payoff will be more than enough for Han to settle his debt with Jabba and ensure that he never has to haggle with the Hutts again. All he has to do is infiltrate the ultra-fortified stronghold of a Black Sun crime syndicate underboss and crack the galaxy's most notoriously impregnable safe. It sounds like a job for a miracle workers or madmen. So Han assembles a gallery of rogues who are a little of both, including his indispensable sidekick Chewbacca and the cunning Lando Calrissian. If anyone can dodge, deceive, or defeat heavily armed thugs, killer droids, and Imperial agents alike and pull off the heist of the century, it's Solo's Scoundrels. But will their crime really pay, or will it cost them the ultimate price? One thing that kind of like, I've never read this book, but one thing that irks me about it is how did they smooth over the whole like long time, like, you know, time between Han and Lando seeing each other? Because like they see each other in episode 5, and it seems like it's been a while, like probably since the events of like the Solo movie, right? But like this book takes place right after episode 4, and episode 5 is only like 3 years later.
That's
right?
fair.
So like, how did they? Do you remember if they like?
Well, in my head
acknowledge
canon, this is before episode 4. I don't know. I didn't really think too deeply about it, to be honest. I just really enjoyed this book.
Yeah, it's very Ocean's 11. Anyway, that's one of those things I'm saying, like, you know, Legends continuity again. Then you get into that little like nitty gritty of like, well, does it work?
Really make sense?
Yeah.
Well, it could be one of those situations where you meet up with someone you haven't seen in quite a few years, and you hang out, and then you don't think you'll ever see them again, and then surprise, you're here. Really, you?
Yeah.
Never thought I'd see you here in Bespin.
It's a good point. So there we go. That's our good list of Star Wars books. And we don't need to get into the plot summaries for all the meh and the ugly, but I do want to do a run through of things that maybe just kind of little hot tips of like, this is what I thought was like. So if we're going to be doing the mess now, the meh, you know, you can consider it bad, but bad is still readable. It's just like, I wouldn't read it again, right? So like that's why I called it the meh section. So like I'm just gonna run through mine. We can just go around, like, you know, you can just kind of run through yours. The number one meh book for me, ironically enough, is a Legends book. And it is 000. It is the Second Republic Commando book, and the reason why this is on my list.
Place on Coruscant.
Yes, and the reason why this is so much on my list is because I really enjoyed the first book, you know, and the one that you put in your good list. And I read the second book, and it very much less features Omega Squad, which is the main squad of the first book, and focuses a bit more on Omega and Delta Squad, and I think 1 or 2 other squads as well, but Delta being the squad from the video game. So it kind of crossed over with the events of the video game, you know, the first book and characters, and then the game characters crossing over met in this book. Sounds like a dream come true, right? But I read it and I was so bored because it was like mostly on Coruscant during wartime. It was super not interesting, at least for me. And it just felt like one of those very stereotypical militarized kind of like novelization, you know, like one of those military books, like one of those Tom Clancy's that you see on the shelf at Save On Foods or something like that. It felt like it may have been like something like that. I just wasn't really excited, and I just remember it being a struggle to get through. And you know, for it's just kind of scarred me for life. I was just like, man, I'm never gonna read that again.
But does that mean you like the third one better?
The third one was better, yeah. And I remember the fourth and the fifth one being really good.
Because I'm trying to think what the order is.
So the third one was True Colors.
Yeah.
The fourth one was Order 66, and the
Okay,
fifth
that's the
one,
I'm thinking of.
Then the last one was Imperial Commando.
Yeah, so that's the third one. I don't remember what happens. Because that the one where they escape and they set up a farm on Mandalore?
I think so.
I don't remember either.
I can't. Did you read these as well?
I remember reading them.
Yeah.
Do I remember anything?
It's been so long. It's been so long since. And so the last time I read
It's a good
this
thing we're
book,
recommending these books.
No, this is the mail list. This is the mail list. This is why I'm not recommending it.
Remember the
But
first
anyways,
one,
okay, so that's number one. Number two on my list, Battlefront Twilight Company. This was horrendous, dude.
Why is this on meh? It should be on bad.
It should be on
this
bad.
is technically bad.
This is technically bad.
It's just not ugly.
No, meh. I thought we decided.
Well, it's
obviously, let's
meh
just
is
understand
like
that we didn't really plan this out very well.
No. It's okay. So here's something to note about like the meh and the bad, right? Like I couldn't come up with enough meh books, so I came up with a list of like these were books that were like bad to me, but also like other people kind of enjoyed them.
Okay, I get yeah.
So.
Because I will say for me, meh was like it would be I read it, it was fine. I'll never read it again.
Yeah, there's that too. It's kind of a mix. It's like an in-between period, you know?
For me, the meh books were books that I wanted to like, but I have way too many sticks and problems with them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. That's a
the
good way,
ugly
yeah.
books were books that I just thought, why were you written?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But on that point, this book is on the Twilight Company is on my list for the why were you written book.
Okay.
section.
You know what? I'll switch them.
All right.
Okay, so I'll talk about that one in a bit. Then
I convinced Josh to take a bigger
I just switched it with another book. Yeah. Okay. So we'll skip that one for now. I'll go to the next one on my list. Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade. This one was a book that we read most recently, and I feel like I enjoyed maybe 65% of the book.
Yeah.
The reason there was a number of reasons that irked me about it. And it usually had to do with mentions that like there's no mention of Count Dooku's turn at all in that novel, which felt very almost like needed for a Jedi who grew up in the Order not to think of this person who is now the opposing villain of the whole war, you know, as sort of like, oh, why did he leave? You know, like this is someone who's contemplating their entire life, you know, their life decision to be a Jedi or not.
And they're involved in the war fighting against Count Dooku and never even mentioned that he used to be Jedi.
Not once was his name mentioned in the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I was completely blown away by the oversight on that.
Yeah.
There was a number of other things. I'm not going to get into it because this isn't supposed to be a lengthy part of the podcast, but this is on my meh list. Okay. Now that I switched Battlefront out, I'm going to put in a different one. The last on my meh list was Jedi Battle Scars. This was a book that I also really wanted to enjoy because it bridges the gap between the first and the second game in the EA Respawn Entertainment Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order. Really wanted to enjoy this book because, you know, I felt like it would become some really worthy connective tissue there. We had an appearance from one of the Inquisitors. It was the fifth brother who also has shown up in Kenobi now, making an appearance in this book. So I thought it was going to be good. Ended up being incredibly not what I expected. And there was only maybe one section of it that was more or less exciting. And all I can tell you it was completely worth skipping. Not worth reading if you really don't want to read it. You know, like, I mean, if you're obsessed with Cal Kestis, you might love the book. But, you know, for me, I was like,
I will disagree.
I could have
with
gone
that,
without it.
And that's why I was looking forward to reading the book was because of Cal Kestis. And I disliked it. So I just didn't enjoy it. To the point where I didn't finish it.
Yeah, you stopped reading it.
I couldn't bring myself to finish reading it because it was just so boring.
Right.
Nothing happened.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There was only one section that I really liked.
Okay.
But the rest of it was not that great.
I also stopped reading it.
Yeah.
Put that in there.
Yeah. So that's my meh list. So maybe Francis, you can kick us off with maybe one of your mess.
I only have two things on my meh list.
Well, now that Battle Scars have been covered.
That's probably under ugly. Meh.
One of them was the Death Troopers prequel. I just felt like it didn't add anything.
Red Harvest?
Yeah. It didn't really add anything to the original, and it just didn't have the same vibe or was written in the same style whatsoever.
Do you feel like it was written because Death Troopers was incredibly successful?
Probably.
Yes.
And then it was just like really bad? Like,
It was literally just, hey, look, that was a very popular book. How can we make more money?
Yeah.
I remember AJ not enjoying Red Harvest as much either.
Yeah, I didn't like it as much either. It sounds like it's pretty unanimous in the fandom.
Yeah.
I'll throw it a bone and say they did throw in an HK-47 unit, but that's about it.
Okay. What else you got?
This was a tough book for me to put on the bad list, but the Old Republic Revan book.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. With my love of Revan and the fact that I have a professional cosplay of Revan, you'd think that I wouldn't have this on my bad list.
Yeah.
You're just being honest. You have a high standard for Revan lore.
Well, when I read it, it was just
So which Revan book is this? The Old Republic Revan book?
Yeah.
Like, okay, all right.
Because it ties in KOTOR 1, 2, and the MMO, but it felt like they were just doing their best to tie in all of the loose threads with what they were given. It's because the games had such different directors and different ways that they wanted to go. It kind of just felt like a hodgepodge of, how the hell could we explain why Revan went here? This guy's in his life. Sure. Let's push him in his life. Yeah, let's make him do this. So it kind of just felt like a lot of weird, half-baked decisions to link the stories. And I wanted to like it. I really wanted to like it. But yeah, it just didn't feel like it was it could have been something
better.
so much more.
Yeah.
It's interesting
Lost
because
potential.
the author for this is the same who wrote the Darth Bane trilogy, Drew Karpyshyn. So it's interesting to me that you just didn't like it that much. But I mean, like, if you really love the character, though, it's almost difficult to impress, right? Like, because then you'd expect something better or something different. So I get it. So that's interesting. I've never read this one, so maybe now I won't.
Again, this is another one in the bookstore I've picked up a few times and just never got to it.
Yeah.
Now I won't.
I mean, I will say there's like, if anyone's interested in the lore of what Revan did between the different games, and why he did certain things and how he got his memory back, that's explained in the book. But I don't blame the author. I blame the game directors because they chose such different paths to bring the character that
This is between the first and second game.
it's between the first and second game, and then there's a time skip on what happened with the last game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because I've only ever played the original RPGs. I've never played the MMO.
Yeah, because Revan also appears in the MMO, but that's, I think, 400 years in the future. And everyone was wondering, why is Revan here in the future?
Yeah.
And this
I heard
book-
they made him not very impressive.
No, not at all.
Was that an actual, like, because I know like the Old Republic MMO game story stuff is super whack now, but like, what was the reason for his return? I'm just curious.
So
If you know, I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, it's just like if you know from memory or whatever.
So from what I remember, Revan, in the book they explain that Revan, oh god, what's her name?
Is it Bastilla Shan?
No, it's Mitra and I'm forgetting the other guy's name, but the three of them, they went to thwart the Sith Emperor. But the other guy got a vision, and he realized that the only person that can defeat the Sith Emperor was a Jedi, and that's neither of them three. So he betrays Mitra, stabs her in the back, literally, and kills her, and lets the Sith Emperor take Revan, and he just pledges his allegiance to the Sith Emperor. And the Sith Emperor basically puts him in an incubation tank and keeps him alive just to torture him every day for more information about the Republic. And somehow the Sith Emperor uses alchemy to keep Revan alive for 300 years just to keep torturing him, which to his credit is very spiteful.
Dang. Okay.
But if you're torturing someone for information, after how long is that information not useful anymore?
Well, in the book, they say that Revan was influencing the Emperor to keep him alive so that he could eventually overthrow him and kill him. But 300 years of getting force
you
lightning. You what? I give up after like the first 5.
Yeah, you think his heart would get out at some point. Like,
Yeah. Luke lasted like 10 seconds.
My great grandfather was torturing you for this information, so you better give it to me today, or it will be tomorrow, or the next day, or my great grandchild.
He will do the same.
yeah.
But I mean, Revan had so much pride that he was like, no. I am not going to give in. But yeah, after 300 years, I forget who, but someone eventually breaks his chamber, lets him out, and he's like, finally, I can have my revenge. But then at that point, Revan's been tortured for so long, his actual light side had already died, and it was just the part of him that was in the dark side and Sith. So that part already took over the body and just wanted revenge. And he goes on his own like side quest for the MMO. And you basically have to stop Revan and stop him from killing everybody to kill the Emperor. And instead, you kill him and you recruit his light side ghost that's returned after killing the dark side ghost. And now he joins you and the whole army of everybody. And then you, as the protagonist, kill the Emperor.
Sounds weird. Yeah.
Sounds like an MMO.
Sounds like an MMO.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly convoluted. And I have no idea why they did this.
Because name drop.
Yeah, but like... why would you have this character from the previous game just be tortured in some guy's basement for 300 years?
I think that's why a lot of
bring him
people don't like the MMO. And, you know, it's just like it's sort of kind of sacrilege to like the original 2 very much beloved games, Knights of the Old Republic.
Well, it's hard to do a good story when you're playing with a bunch of people all doing the same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because MMO is more of a social game, but
Yeah.
not meant to explain a lot of storytelling.
Blake, let's hear your meh list. Your 3.
Okay,
Or
so-
2, whatever you got.
So for meh, when I think of meh, my explanation of it, just so everyone listening knows what's going on, it's I read it once. It was okay. You know, I didn't dislike it. If I hadn't read it yet, I would read it once. But now that I've read it, I'm not going to go back to it. So the first one, Josh might get mad, is Ahsoka.
No, I get it.
It was okay. At the time, I'm glad I found out what happened to Ahsoka after Clone Wars ended, because we were all wondering this.
Yeah.
It was not a lot happened, I felt like. We found out how she got her silver lightsabers.
Yeah.
She learned how to farm and look after some kids and pretend she wasn't a Jedi.
Yeah. I think, you know, as far as the character transformation goes, she goes from sort of going from like a hiding sort of characters to finally something bringing her out into where she's revealing herself as a Jedi. And, you know, that's a big transformation moment. And that's where she contacts Bail and, you know, gets involved with the rebellion. And anyone who's thinking, oh, this sounds very familiar, it's because they adapted a section of this book into one of the Tales of the Jedi animated shorts. The third one that we see Ahsoka take on the masked Inquisitor, who in the book was actually, I forget which number it was, but he had been a very, up until the animated short, which I have gripes with, because it didn't really flesh out the story very well. And it was not the right visual design for that particular Inquisitor that we'd seen in the comic books for Darth Vader. And I believe we never actually, in the animated version, we never got that moment where she takes the Inquisitor's lightsaber, empties the kyber crystals, and takes those and purifies them and turns them white. That would have been like, if they did that in the animated short, that would have made that animated short so much better.
I don't know why they didn't do it.
And they didn't do that.
It's so strange because it would explain what happened to all these people who didn't read the books, why she has these white lightsabers. We've never seen white lightsabers before.
Yep.
And it was in that moment and they didn't do it. I don't know if they just pressed for time.
And it's such a powerful moment.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. So yeah, meh, definitely. I agree.
Like if you've read everything else on our list, like feel free to read this one. It was okay, but it's a one and done for me.
Fair enough.
The next I have is for the new series of books that came out. I put High Republic books 1 and 3 because book 2 is terrible and on my bad list. So I actually really enjoyed the first one of the High Republic series, the main series that came out.
Light of the Jedi.
Light of the Jedi. This one to me was cool because I really liked the bad guys.
Yeah.
And I would probably put the sister book on the same tier here as well, which is the one where we find out about the Sith plant creatures.
Oh yeah, it was a young adult novel called Into the Dark,
Yeah, okay, that's the
I
one.
believe.
The only issue with that one is they built all of this thing up with this new like Sith alchemy evil monster creature. And it could have been as cool as Death Troopers is what it was going for, and why I really liked the book. Right until the very end, where they decided to make the creatures sentient and they're like talking to people and stuff, and just totally ruined it. Because it should have been a monster, like from the Alien franchise, like a xenomorph sort of thing. You can't really interact. It's just something on a destructive path, and it's uncontrollable, and they have to figure out how to survive.
Yeah, they made them talk, and that was stupid.
They ruined it. Honestly, it could have been so cool.
Yeah.
And in the High Republic series, kind of the same thing, where the bad guy they build up the bad guys are this group of what are essentially raiders from the what was that series called? The Mad Max series.
Right.
Where they're these kind of like these punk. Everything's kind of like covered in random spikes unnecessarily. They're really into like rock metal. And they're just constantly doing drugs, and they just don't care.
Yeah, the Nihil.
The Nihil. And they're kind of like these. They're basically like a Viking space version of the Raiders from Mad Max. And I thought that was super cool. I really enjoyed them, but then again, they kind of squandered it. So it didn't really go anywhere. That's why I like the first book for both of these things, but I wouldn't read any farther than that.
So you liked Light of the Jedi,
yeah,
and you liked
the third one was okay. I that's why it's on the meh list. But the second one was complete hot garbage, in my opinion.
Okay, the third one is called what again?
Maybe it's a bit harsh. I did not enjoy that one. I found it very boring.
The second one, you mean?
The second one, yes.
So the second one.
Yeah.
So the second one's on your meh list.
No, it's on my bad list. The void list.
Oh, okay. We're not doing bad yet. We're doing
Correct.
mess.
Yeah. So meh is 1 and 3.
Meh is Light of the Jedi.
Yes.
Okay. So meh is Light of the Jedi, and I'm looking for the third title. That one is.
I don't think I ever read these books. But so the monster thing that carries throughout the trilogy, or is it that just the
so
first one?
there's
The Fallen Star. That's
Fallen
the third
Star.
one.
That's the one. It's about the space station. So when they launched the High Republic series, I think it's about a year ago now, 2 years ago.
Oh no! This was
Time
they
doesn't
launched the High Republic series at the basically almost like the first year into the pandemic. So it was like 2020. So about three years ago.
Man, time flies.
Yeah.
So when they first launched it, there were several series they launched simultaneously or within a few months of each other, and they've launched them kind of by age category. So there's the adult novels, which are the Light of the Jedi, the ones I'm talking about here.
Right.
And then there's the young adults, which is the monster one I'm referring to. The first one's Into the Dark.
Yeah, Into the Dark. They did like Midnight Horizon or something. They did, yeah. Basically, they did. They have the High Republic set up in waves. So the first wave was like 400 years before Phantom Menace, and it's starts with the Light of the Jedi book, introduces the villains of the story, the Nihil, right? And there was going to be 3 of the adult Del Rey novels, which were Light of the Jedi, the Rising Storm, and the Fallen Star. And sort of the main overarching plot of that was that the Jedi are trying to expand to the Outer Rim, and so they have to set up and build a space station called Starlight Beacon, which is basically like a Death Star style thing, but maybe not as big, and it's sort of like a light-sided thing, that they can. It's like for the HoloNet, right? They can like finally, because the HoloNet doesn't have like enough reception to get out to the Outer Rim yet very well, so it's like
it's
that.
Kind of
it's
like how the old
medical
West
centers
was happening simultaneous with New York being built. So
yeah,
there's society, like what we call like modern society, kind of starting to take place, but there's also
the frontier.
The frontier is happening simultaneously.
Yeah. So that's, and then the Nihil are like kind of messing things up for them. So that's what the main books are about. The young adult novels took it one step down and sort of were sister books, like what Blake was saying, where it would be involving like maybe younger-ish, like Jedi Padawans and like their master or whatever, sort of in between like being affected by these main events, but they were off doing something else. And it was like different stories elsewhere happening with mentions to these like grander kind of plot lines going on in the main adult series. And then there was the junior series, which there was 3 of those, and or 4 of those or whatever. And those were even for younger readers, and also kind of a further step down. They would kind of be playing off of the main plot line, but they would be more subsidiary kind of stories going on.
So they're kind of all happening.
And the comic book series. There was the Marvel comic book series as well that was tying into all of that.
And I will say this one thing I really liked about the High Republic eras that they were doing with these waves, because everything the writers and authors between all of them they're doing a really good job.
Yeah, they're all in one room.
Yeah, like talking and like planning all this stuff. So everything ties together really well.
Super well. Yeah.
Everything kind of references each other, and some are directly impacted by other novels and stories, which is super cool. But at the same time, I would say not all of them hit the mark.
Yeah, yeah. The second wave was a prequel wave. So wave 2 is chronologically actually the first one you read, and that's 200 years before the Light of the Jedi book takes place. And it's the same format. They got the adult novels, the young adult and junior. And then phase 3, which starts up, I think, very soon. That wave is the final wave, and I think there's a bit of a time jump between the end of phase 1 and I think they're going like 100 years later, and this wave will take us to about 100-ish years before Phantom Menace, maybe 200 years before, and leading into like the Acolyte TV show, which is going to be on Disney Plus.
Okay.
And there's a confirmed character from the novels that is in that show, and it's a Wookiee Jedi, and maybe it's not the same character, or like a different character that is the same idea, I guess. But they've there is a character that is showing up that is the same character, and it's that girl with the purple skin, and I forget her name. Vernestra, maybe. Anyway, in the show she's like an older woman, but in the books that we've read she's like a young girl. So it's kind of cool.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's your 2 mehs, and then you got a third?
Yes, and my third meh is Last Shot.
Last Shot. Yeah, I remember you didn't like that one. That was the Han Solo Lando book, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so this book takes place very close to the beginning to The Force Awakens. And the reason why it's on meh, and I didn't put it on the bad, is it has a lot of cool, good things that are filling in a lot of gaps, stuff, explaining things that kind of you see in The Force Awakens. They did a really good job with that. And I liked Lando's story arc overall, but there's a common theme I'm seeing with my meh selection, and that's they just can't wrap it up right. It falls apart in the last third of the book.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if you remember, there was that Sith mask thing going on, and then people were being possessed by it in like a Lando book.
Oh yeah, that was in the Lando comic book. Yeah, that was in this book.
I think so.
It showed up again.
Yeah, because there's because I think there's someone who has because it's all tied together with Rey's parents.
Really?
Am I getting this mixed up?
You're thinking of Shadows of the Sith?
Is that also a Lando book?
Yeah, it was a Lando and Luke book. Yeah.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Last Shot. This one.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Everyone listening, ignore what I've said. The book that I don't like is in my mech.
Okay, here. This might help you out. Plot summary. Last Shot consists of 4 storylines spread across 5 parts. The main storyline is set in the New Republic era, 2 years after the Battle of Jakku. It is told from the points of view of Han and Lando, who are coming to terms with life in the New Republic. The other 3 storylines are a collection of flashback chapters set during the Imperial era, featuring Solo Calrissian L337 from the Solo movie, the antagonistic pawn rogue surgeon Fyzen Gore, and the wandering star crime boss Slee Pasteria. There's also a mention of some sort of Ewok slicer involved. That was my own words right there. Do you remember an Ewok hacker, like a computer genius who's like an Ewok?
Oh man, I know. I'm positive I've read this.
Went to a very different place when you said Ewok slicer.
I think I've read this book as well.
No, this is the book. This is the book.
This is Last Shot you're talking
about. Last Shot, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I've read this as well, but it's not the one I was thinking of to put on my Met list.
Okay, all right. Well, Daniel Jose Older wrote this book. He's actually one of the authors involved with the High Republic stuff.
That means it was probably, if they brought him back, then it's probably one of the better ones.
Well, I mean, I don't know how successful it was. Financially, though, I think there's enough people out there just buying them for the heck of it.
Well, I find the writers that the first book does well, they tend to get more work, like within the Lucasfilm stuff. So the one I actually meant to talk about was Shadows of the Sith.
Oh, okay. So that's on your meta list.
Yes.
Okay, so Last Shot's not on your list?
No, sorry. That was a bonus. I don't know where it will fall in the category because, to be honest, I don't remember enough about it.
Oh, okay.
But I do remember an Ewok hacker, so I'm pretty sure I've read this.
I remember you didn't like this one at all, so I wasn't surprised
there you go.
when I remember you complaining about it.
I repressed it. So
dishonorable mention.
Yeah, honorable mention.
Dishonorable
honorable mention. Yeah. Okay, so what you meant to say was Shadow of the Sith is
Yes.
on your meh list.
That's right.
Okay,
because-
this came out in 2022, so that was last year.
Yeah,
and it
we
was
did a
written by
review.
Adam Christopher, and we did a review on this book. And if it focuses on Luke and Lando Calrissian and the growing threat of the Sith Eternal. It featured Rey's parents, featured Achi of Bastoon, the assassin who kills them. There was a whole plot line with Luke and Lando sort of tracking this guy down, or trying to, due to some sort of, like transmission that they intercept at one point or whatever. And I remember you weren't a huge fan of this one, but
well, like I was meaning to explain for this book and not the other one, was the first 3 quarters were quite good, and they filled in a lot of gaps going into it's pre-Force Awakens, but it also fills in a lot of stuff from Rise of Skywalker, like a lot of Ochi and all this stuff.
It filled out some gaps for Force Awakens too, because we saw Luke in this book.
And this is where we find out that how Rey came about with Palpatine's son clone, who then escapes and then weds, and they have Rey and go on the run while she was abandoned.
Yeah.
And so all of that stuff I liked. And I liked the vast majority of Lando's story, which he was trying to find his daughter. But then basically the finale of the book, it all just falls apart. Where they fight this random Sith, a guy who had a Sith Lord who...
He's not a Sith. He's a guy, he's like a cultist.
Okay.
He's a cultist who puts on some sort of mask, right?
Okay, there's a cultist. So I'm trying to remember the details now. So there's a cultist, but he finds this mask, and the mask has been enchanted to be basically the soul of this Dark
Sith Lord
is in the mask.
Yeah.
And so the mask keeps telling him what to do and how to raise this cult or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the very end, the guy who has the mask, sorry about spoilers, so he dies, but then the mask itself possesses the body and starts to come back himself. And then the Sith Lord dies by being snatched up by a sea monster and dragged out to sea out of nowhere.
Right.
And it's just like, what happened?
They also introduced something.
Hold on.
They also,
I was with you up until
I know, that's what I'm saying. I just felt like the author ran out of time and just like put something in there.
Yeah, I feel like it was really, really weird.
I know.
It was super
Maybe
weird.
I'm quoting it slightly wrong.
No, you got it right. Like within the last 2 or 3 chapters or whatever, it was just over, and it was like, what the heck? Like it just felt like it should have kept going for a bit, and then it just ended.
what book was this?
Shadows of the Sith, or Shadow of the Sith, a Luke and Lando book. Anyway, here's another weird thing about it. The character who had the mask on, he wielded a lightsaber from also an ancient Sith Lord by the name of Darth Noctis.
Right. Yeah. I remember.
And I believe the blade had some sort of like twist, or like a hook. It was like a hook blade or something.
Oh, it was like scimitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a scimitar
I don't know how they
lightsaber.
explain that.
Yeah, like how does a lightsaber end up with it's super
We're
weird.
getting into EU territory again, which is they had like light axes and stuff, which doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all. Like I can
They recanonized that light whip as well in the High Republic.
that I can buy, but not as much. But it's like I can kind of accept it, I guess, because we've seen energy weapons in the Clone Wars with the Zygerians, and that one's I guess that just more intense could be like a lightsaber whip thing.
Okay.
But a lightsaber scimitar, give me a break. It's just like a curved lightsaber. How does that work?
Technically, you could. They never say that you have to have the field that controls the lightsaber's shape. You can control what size it is. They never said you can't control its shape.
I mean, I will argue that the dark saber is flat,
That's true, actually. Yeah.
like an actual samurai sword.
You ever hear the theory
Right.
about that? Like why the dark saber is flat?
I have not.
The running theory is that all lightsabers actually have a proper edge alignment, and that's why certain things bounce off of the lightsaber and certain things get cut when they go through a lightsaber. But because lightsabers have such wide field emitters, you don't necessarily see where the proper edge is, but you can feel it when you have the hilt or when you're holding the hilt. That's also why they still curve and twist their wrist when they're cutting through things.
So it's more like it's so bright that you can't see it from the camera, but the dark saber you can.
Yeah, because it's so dim. And you just,
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
I can accept this fan theory.
I thought Jabba just sat on the hilt and
Squashed it.
flattened it. Yeah. Okay, let's get into the ugly list here. This will be fun. Real quick. Battlefront Twilight Twilight Company, friggin' terrible dude. Like, I barely made my way through that book. It was so bad, and I never want to read it again. I don't ever want to see it on a shelf. I don't want to see you buying this book. Like, this this book was so boring, and it was basically, to give you a summary, it was like after episode 4 features the a company of rebel soldiers within the rebellion called Twilight Company, and it was basically just a story of where do we go, what do we do, like how do we hide, you know, and it was just average everyday Joes, you know, just in the mud. And I think it was supposed to be like a gritty novel, but it came across as really boring.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, but to me, it felt like what they were trying to do was tell you're in the trenches, almost like a World War II journal kind of story. Like you're doing a film about this journal, but you don't skip any of the boring parts where nothing happens in between. So it's rationing and, you know, the day to day, trying to live with this kind of anxiety of what anything can happen at any moment. But it was just super boring
Because nothing happened.
Yeah, nothing happened. I've tried to read this book 3 to 4 times, and I always gave up. And then I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what's happening, so I gotta
commit. It's like swallowing that giant pill in the morning. You just got to.
I couldn't do it, man. And like, I would put it on, try to listen to it while I go to bed, and I would just fall asleep immediately.
It's bad. It's bad. It's bad.
I think this is one of the books that I thought about picking up in the reading, but
don't do it, man.
Don't do it.
It's not worth it.
I will avoid it like the plague.
Yeah.
Okay, one book that was completely like, okay, this is not on the bad list at all. It was Battlefront 2. Inferno Squad. Great book. Completely different author, because this one was written by Alexander Freed. He actually ended up writing I think he did the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, which I have not read. But Battlefront 2, I don't know why they call it Battlefront and Battlefront 2, because these books, other than the second one, the first book had nothing to do with the first game at all. Like, it was just themed to be military, and that was it. I think it was just a poke for like, hey, go buy the game, right? The second one, though, was actually really good. The second one featured Inferno Squad, the main character that you play as, Iden Versio. It was about her squad, you know, prior to the events of the game. And it was actually a good book. Like, I would recommend this one to anyone who enjoyed that campaign. So if you're looking at a Battlefront book on the shelf and it's Star Wars, if it's Inferno Squad, buy it. If it's Twilight Company, do not buy it.
It's very confusing. I didn't read the second one, because the first one was so bad.
But the second one has nothing to do with the first one.
Yeah, but the name, it says
just
Battlefront 2. So
it's just the name,
assumed it was the second one.
I know. The first one like put a curse on the title for like the whole series. It sucks because the second one was that good, but whatever. Okay, second one on my list. This is an honorable mention to the entire trilogy of the Aftermath. Chuck Wendig. Freaking Chuck Wendig and his Aftermath trilogy. Thanks for the worst 3 books ever made, Chuck.
I don't know if I go quite that far, but
I'm just trying to be hard.
I had a really high bar for these novels. It was the first trilogy in the Disney canon.
We all looked at it as a replacement for Thrawn trilogy.
Exactly, and it was replacing the Thrawn trilogy. So there's a couple things he kept in that I liked, which was the same as I mentioned with the Thrawn trilogy, the different sections of the Empire.
The fragmentation.
It fragmented and became like these warlords that were controlling their own sectors. That part was cool. Everything else about this book, though.
So the weirdest part of this entire trilogy is it is written from the first person perspective, and it is incredibly awful to read. It is incredibly awful to read. Like the way that you read it, it sucks, dude. Like, it is so bad.
How is it written? Because this is one of those books where I was also thinking about picking it up, but I looked up the reviews and thought, nah.
So you know, when you read a book, it is typically almost every book out there, unless it's like a reference book of some kind, is written from the third person. So it's like, I want to go to the supermarket, so and so said, and then so on and so forth, right?
That's first person.
No, this is the third person, because the first person is really weird, right? Because like it's here. I can't even describe it.
First person is I want to do this.
Have you ever
Third
read a book
person
that's
is
in the
Sarah
second
wants to do
person?
this.
Have you ever read a book that's in the second person?
Is that like the second dimension?
So, you know how like a first person book, that's your perspective.
Yeah.
A third person book is someone else describing the perspective.
Right.
Well, for the third person perspective, that's someone uninvolved with the situation that's saying what you're doing. So like,
Oh, interesting.
John goes to do the thing. But a second person perspective would be a related source, but still a removed source.
So someone who was there but is talking about someone else.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
technically, a second person perspective would be if I was telling you a story. That's a second person perspective.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
See, I did not know that.
I did not know that either. Okay, so
Oh God, you have it out.
I do. Yeah. I'm trying to like find a really good example of like how badly this kind of
Flipping
comes
through
across.
at random.
Yeah.
Well, while you're looking, I'm going to say a few of the other things
go
I
for
can
it, go for
remember
it.
that actually.
Yeah. Go for it.
I didn't mind. So the creation of Mr. Bones.
Oh yeah, Mr. Bones is like the only good thing about it.
So Mr. Bones is a B1 battle droid that has been rebuilt, and he has essentially become psychotic.
Oh.
And you can kind of think of him as like a, I would say like a now fully sentient, but almost like a whimsical psychotic pet. So the character that rebuilt him, which is this kid, I forget the name of the kid. Wait, isn't it the guy?
Temmin Wexley.
Yeah, so that's the character who is J.J. Abrams' good friend, who he made a pilot in The Force Awakens. So there's a guy in the he's in the battle plans. He's a bigger guy, and he's got like a full beard on him.
Okay.
That's him. So he plays Temmin Wexley, which is one of the main characters in this. And he built Mr. Bones.
Okay.
So that part was kind of a neat tie-in. Mr. Bones' character, he's probably the only quoted thing from this novel trilogy, to be honest with you. There's like a fan following of him.
The other he was also in the Lego Skywalker Saga game. They made him a playable minifigure in that game.
Mr. Bones?
Yeah, that's how popular he is. Yeah.
Oh, is he the
It's a red B1 battle droid.
Yeah, he's an unlockable character.
Oh,
in the
okay,
game.
yeah.
It's red. He's red. He's got like graffiti printed on over. Yeah, he's got graffiti on him of like bones, like kind of on him and stuff. Yeah, and he's got like all these other parts on him and stuff. Okay, so just
And he loves melee combat, so he like thrashes people and like. I think he rips limbs off. I can't remember.
Oh, God. Wow.
Yeah, and he's a B1 battle droid, and he's like very happy about doing it. So that's why he's so memorable. He's kind of an HK-47, but instead of being like psychotic in a way that almost is with HK-47, where he's like disturbingly kind of like intellectual about it, like, oh, please let me do this, master. Whereas Mr. Bones is more just a psychotic killer in the fact that he just takes such great pleasure in this uncontrollable bloodlust.
So it's more akin to like, I am going to rip you limb from limb, and I will enjoy it. Roger.
But
he's a bit like
very
000.
happy about it.
He's a bit like 000 from the Dr. Aphra story, the black
Okay.
C-3PO looking protocol droid that's like super obsessed with torturing people. He's a bit like that, but more or less hell-bent on like torturing for pleasure and more just like, let's kill this guy kind of thing. And he's like really...
Okay.
He's a B1 battle droid with the Commando droid processor or something like that.
Okay, so that's how they explain it.
It's something like that. Yeah.
I also listened to the audiobook, so it maybe helps too, because he has this very goofy voice.
Okay, here's a good example. Okay, here's a good example. So Lando Calrissian is like impersonating somebody. So this is Gev Hessen piloting an HH-87 Starhopper, the rover. He transmits his data card, sending over credentials. A pause. Identify the nature of your visit. Light cargo. What cargo? The stock answer is droid components, but that may not fly here. He thinks quickly. Akiva. Hot. Wet. Mostly jungle. Dehumidifier parts. Pause. An excruciating one. The nav computer runs through its calculations. Almost there. A different voice comes through the tinny speaker. A woman's voice. Got some steel in it. Less crisp. Nothing lilting. So like...
Sounds like a script.
It's
I was gonna
basically...
say, this sounds like a script.
Yeah, so it reads really awkwardly because you don't always know who's talking. And that to me was like the most awful part of the book was like I was going through and I was like, wait, who said what now? Like I just get like it's easier to read a book and be like Lando says this, so and so like says that,
That's
like
funny.
and then the quote and then like says so and so, right? Like it's easier to read it like that for me just because so many books are written like that and these ones were not. Like
it's weird though because I never had this issue and I did the audiobooks. So they actually had different, or the guy who was narrating it had different voices for all the characters.
Yeah.
So I didn't have this issue.
See, it makes sense, and that would be better, right? And like I know some books out there that have been written literally for audio, like the Dooku Jedi Lost book or Tempest Runner, or like they've done like 2 or 3 now. and they've been designed to be
In that
an
format.
audiobook, because if you buy the book, like the physical copy of it, it is literally just a script, like you like it's character colon and the quotes and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
But this is kind of that weird in between where it is a book that you read and the audiobook comes later. But like when you read it, it's just awkward.
Fair enough.
Like awkward is kind of the best way I can describe it.
So if someone listening is interested in going through these novels, the replacement for the Thrawn trilogy, not the most highly decorated books, I would say, from everyone on the show, but if you're going to listen to the audiobook, because it'll be significantly less confusing.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Yeah, it's a good tip. Also, one thing I did like about it, though, one thing other than Mr. Bones, was that the books were, even though they were telling an overarching story of the early New Republic, like the forging of the New Republic in this strange time, it did a really nice job of having interludes throughout the book. And the interludes just kind of slotted in between chapters, and it would just have the planet's name or a location of some kind as the chapter title. And it would just tell like a one chapter story of somewhere in the galaxy. Sometimes it was a character that you were familiar with from the movies. Sometimes it was just background events going on.
The only one I remember is them pulling down the statue of Palpatine.
That's the first one in the book.
which was a scene added in the special edition.
Yeah, that's right. So that's a good example of like what kind of stuff that they would put in these interludes. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to hear about like the crowd pulling down Palpatine's like thing, or and a lot of the interludes do take place on Coruscant as well, like throughout the book. There's another one for Coruscant. There's one, and the book itself is split into like multiple parts as well. So there's interludes, there's chapters, there's parts. So it reads as like a very...
Oh, this is one of these interludes. The interludes are more interesting than the novel itself.
They are,
yeah. One of them actually set up, what's his name? The guy who gets Boba Fett's armor.
Oh, yeah. That's why I like the interlude so much. Cobb Vanth.
Who then shows up the Mandalorian.
Yeah. So that story of how Cobb Vanth acquired the armor was just adapted into live action, but that was all straight out of these books. Directly out of these books.
But they didn't tell you who it was in these books, so a lot of people were speculating at the time that it was Boba.
Well, they did have a name. It was Cobb Vanth, but people thought that Cobb Vanth may have just been Boba. Yeah. We were wrong. Yeah. I think it was Cobb Vanth who was like, yeah, because I remember when he showed up on screen and like he gave his name, I was like, no friggin' way. Like,
this is him?
That's him. Yeah.
Cobb Vanth?
Cobb in the corn? What? Yeah. So Aftermath Trilogy. Wait, was I giving my list or was you giving yours? How were we doing this?
You were doing yours.
Yes, you were doing yours.
Okay. All right.
There's still two more.
Oh,
of us
dang.
here.
Oh, dang.
I know we're going pretty
long. We went so long on this. Okay. Here's another one. My last one on the list was, because you already said The Rising Storm, I'm going to say the High Republic Tempest Runner. It was designed for audio and it was terrible. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I was just bored. It was an in-between story and did not need to happen.
No, I agree. And when they announced what this book was going to be about, it seemed like a joke.
Yeah, it was about one of the villains' like side characters.
Not even that. So the main story takes place at a county fair in Star Wars.
No. That was the Rising Storm book. That was the one that you don't like. That was why I'm not going to.
Names are also similar.
That's why I'm not mentioning it. I'm talking about Tempest Runner. Okay. It was designed to be an audiobook.
Okay.
And it's about Lorna D, who's like a Nihil, like female Nihil, like Twi'lek person or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was just boring. I didn't have a good time with that.
Was this the one that took place on the Disney Star Cruiser?
No,
Helix or something?
No, I don't believe. No. You're thinking of a new book that featured Han and Leia. I think it's called The Apprentice and the Scoundrel. I think Tempest Runner.
I need to look this up.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because I thought it had some tie into the Disney Cruiser, Disney Hotel.
Tempest Runner, written by Kevin Scott. No mention of the Halcyon Legacy. No, but it is what it is. It's an in-between story that took place between the second and the third book. It was about how one of the characters who got captured in one of the books ends up just getting away. That was the entire story.
Oh, hold on. I think I'm getting it mixed up with just the fact that So there's Lorna D, and then there's the Jedi girl with the light whip, right? And then she befriends a kid, and his dad runs a cruise liner, a Star Wars cruise liner similar to the Disney Hotel.
What? No, I think you're still
I am
thinking of
so
a different
confused.
Okay.
book. I think you're thinking of one of the junior books.
It is the junior book.
Yeah, it's not Tempest Runner.
It's the second junior book in the junior High Republic.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
First wave.
It's not this one.
Okay.
I think only I read this one. It was an audio book, like exclusive to audio kind of
okay.
thing. Yeah.
I enjoyed these
I
books
didn't
so much,
recommend
I
it to
can't remember.
anyone. I didn't recommend this one to anyone, which is probably why you haven't read it.
Okay.
Because I listened to it and I was like, okay, this sucks.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, okay, moving on. Francis, take us up another notch. What's on your ugly list?
I have another bit of a cheat thing. I have the Jedi Academy books,
Jedi Academy books.
the old ones.
Based on the games?
No.
Okay.
Here, give me a second.
I'm just looking them up here because are you talking about like the kid series?
Like
No,
2000s?
not the kid series. The Jedi Academy trilogy.
Okay.
Is it not the one where Luke? Because if it's based on the games, then Luke creates the new Jedi Order.
The first one is Jedi Search, then Dark Apprentice.
Oh,
and Champions of the Force.
yeah. I've seen
Those
these.
ones.
I've seen these. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. The Champions of the Force book is the third book in the series. This series is written by Kevin J. Anderson, and the third title was the name of the first booster expansion series, or second, or whatever it was, for the Star Wars miniatures game, which I was obsessed with, and I have so many of them right here. And I remember going to the game store and buying a booster box, and it was the Star Wars Champions of the Force booster series. And I believe this version of Luke Skywalker on the cover was like one of the potential things that you could like get in that wave, because that was like a big EU, dived into the EU stuff with all that stuff. But anyways, okay, so why didn't you like these ones?
To be honest, it's been quite a few years since I've fully read them. But I remember as a kid, they were just really convoluted and confusing. And from what I remember, I used to remember as a kid really hating reading them. And I remember feeling like, why did someone write this? And I remember I looked up the plot summary because I'm like, why do I remember hating this so much? And as I read the summary, I was confused as to what the story was.
So yeah, this is interesting. Several stories throughout the three books. The main plot is that of Exar Kun's spirit attempting to turn Luke's trainee Jedi. He kills one of them and turns Kip Duron, who goes on a rampage with the Sun Crusher. The Jedi trainees eventually destroy Kun and Kip and is brought back to the light by his friend Han Solo. That is the weirdest sounding story.
It's the story of Ben Solo.
I didn't know that Exar Kun's spirit came up again at all.
Didn't either. Yeah.
Like, that's weird.
It's a very
stuck on
confusing
Korriban.
trilogy.
Yeah, no kidding. It also says here a later novel that came out in the late 90s, because this was 94 was the first one. In the same year the whole trilogy came out. The last one came out September in 94.
So pretty close to the Thrawn trilogy.
Yeah, a few years later. Yeah. Later, a book called I, Jedi, is a retcon of much of the action at the Jedi Academy, inserting Karan Horn into the storyline and smoothing out parts that do not conform to the later continuity. That book was published in 1998. So, like, even if you do read all the EU Legends material and stuff, it seems that a lot of this trilogy is kind of discounted from that continuity as well. So that's just goes to say how bad it is. Thank you for that mention.
It was like trying to figure out how a ball of yarn was put into the ball. It was just like, okay, I have this piece. Now I have this piece. Why does this ball of yarn have 3 ends? Why does it have 4 ends? Oh, there's a needle in here. Oh, why is there another needle in here? This isn't even a ball of yarn. None of this makes sense.
It sounds very confusing.
Yeah, sounds like that's what I'm getting from this.
What else you got?
The other thing that I have is the Legacy of the Force series.
The whole series?
Yes, all 9 books.
Really?
Did you read all of them before you came to this conclusion?
I read one of these books, and it was it must have been the second one, Bloodlines. Does that sound familiar? It's the one with
Yes.
Boba Fett on the cover. This was the book that brought him back in like the EU.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
So this inspired the book of Boba Fett.
probably.
I'd hope not.
Well, I mean, the book of Boba Fett to most people didn't turn out that well either. But this one was written by Karen Travis,
Okay.
who wrote Republic Commando, and it came out, I think, this came out after Republic Commando. But it was 2008 that she did this one.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this book.
Yeah, she became like the Mandalorian author for a while.
Yeah. So she wrote this one, and the Legacy of the Force books tell a very like big part of that post Return of the Jedi era. You're talking about the entire story of like Luke and his wife, and like the turning of Jason Solo.
wow.
Like why didn't you like the storyline?
So before Legacy of the Force, the series before that, I forget what it's called, but they kind of established Jason, like they already had a whole plot line of Jason kind of falling to the dark side and then redeeming himself and then becoming a full Jedi and becoming one with the Force and
Ben Solo.
becoming a master. And then like 2 years later, he does this again. And it's like, we've already been over this. And it felt like a character assassination of all of the previous books where Jason falls to the dark side again. But this time it's because he saw a vision of the entire galaxy going to ruin. And so he finds this one Sith lady who's like, hey, if you team up with me, these things won't happen. And he's like, no. But then he sees a vision of if this Sith lady dies, then everything goes to ruin. So he's like, well, actually, I will help you. And Ben goes to try and defeat this lady, but then he's like, no. She needs to live. So then he just goes on this whole thing of betraying his family, betraying everyone he loves and cares for, all to work for this lady. And it kind of all just comes to a point of at the very end, kind of like what you were saying with the books that you didn't like, it kind of just felt like they just dropped the ball, where at the very end nothing really came out of it other than
Didn't know what to do with it.
yeah, at the very end, Jason finally realized that, oh no, I've been in the wrong, right after his sister stabs him. And then he sends a Force message to his wife and kid that while he was being a bad person, he sent someone to assassinate them. So hey guys, avoid that.
Dang, that sounds
Bye.
Sounds pretty convoluted.
And then like throughout this whole thing, like Luke and Han and like everyone in this family is trying to find him, but everyone basically abandons him and says like, well, he's evil now, we're not just gonna associate with him anymore. But Luke still tries to go save his nephew, and
Yes,
that
Luke.
plot kind of just goes nowhere.
So this was
This is just one book of 9.
So this whole series then you didn't like, or it was like, did you enjoy it up until a certain point, up until a certain up until a certain
What I
pint?
just
Yeah,
described,
They come in pints.
yeah.
what I just described was like the last 4 books, where the first 5 are the setup of, hey, Jason's a cool guy, Ben's a cool guy, hey, his sister's pretty cool.
It's Ben.
Everyone's happy.
You're talking about Luke's son Ben.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Luke's son Ben. They kind of just establish this threat, and it keeps building up, and then Jason betrays them, and then like I said, it just felt like it didn't go anywhere until they kill him at the end.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the second one was the only one I read. There was a lot of emphasis on Boba Fett though, and I don't remember it being
because Boba Fett like trains.
he trains some. Who does he train?
I think it's Luke's daughter. Is it
So
Jaina?
Boba Fett actually has a daughter in this continuity.
Yeah.
And she meets up with like the Luke squad and joins them, but then realizes that she's not a proficient warrior, so she goes back and gets Boba Fett to train her without realizing that she's his daughter. I think that gets revealed later on in some other book.
That sounds familiar. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I remember it being like, okay, it wasn't terrible, but I can't remember enough of it to put on my list. So, it's interesting that you're bringing them up.
It just felt like they had so many cool ideas and they just shoved them all into one thing and then just didn't do anything with them. Yeah.
Is that the rest of your list, or do you have like one more thing on there?
That's the end of my list.
Blake, take us home.
Well, most of my avoid list has already been mentioned. So first one is Battlefront Twilight Company.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, a number of these I couldn't even finish. That's why they're on my don't.
Fair
bother
enough. Fair enough.
list.
Well, we talked enough about that one. What else you got?
Well, I talked about
Aftermath.
Yep, the aftermath. I put
Aftermath.
the whole aftermath trilogy on here.
Yeah, I did too.
Just skip it.
Yep.
It's not. Just read the Thrawn trilogy. It's better.
Yeah.
Just hold out hope that it'll be canonized again. Then High Republic 2, which is the one that
Rising Storm.
Rising Storm.
Yeah.
Which is the second book in the adult series of the first wave.
Yeah.
So convoluted.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah.
It's all about a fair.
Yeah. So to me, the biggest issue with this one, and we talked about it a bit, but just to reiterate, they set up the storyline really well with the first book, and then they squandered it in the second one. The main story takes place, as I was previously mentioning for the wrong book, at the New Republic's county fair. So sorry, I guess it's just the Republic.
It's like
the
it's called
Republic's county
the
fair.
Republic Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they decide they're gonna have kind of like a world fair sort of thing, like they used
Like
to
an
have.
expo.
Yeah. So all these different planets, cultures, they all show up, and they all have like a novelty version of their home world and their culture.
And this is supposed to be in retaliation for all the devastation caused in the first book, by the Nihil.
By the
right?
Nihil,
Naturally,
which
the Nihil
They
attacked
show
the
up.
fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But man, it just drug on and on about one of the Jedi having like a will they won't they relationship issue, and how it's following the Jedi.
Yeah.
What do they call them?
I couldn't believe the
Their-
whole
the
book like
rules.
basically took place like at this fair.
Yeah,
like that
so
was
boring.
It was like it was like how many people can we save from the fair? And I was like,
Yeah,
oh man,
it's
it
like
was just
about one Jedi and his dog.
it was bad. It was just bad. Like it was
Even
like
the Nihil part was just not interesting.
But, you know,
which
I
is
felt-
the characters I liked.
and like here's the thing about the High Republic stuff is like every author writes a different book, right? So like it was a huge sort of letdown because the first one was so good, and then you read the second one, it's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Right?
And so you put the third one on here, same as the second, but the third one.
No, it wasn't the third one. It was
Okay.
the in between one, the audiobook in between chapter. It was just called Tempest Runner.
Okay.
And it was like High Republic 2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. The third one I actually liked.
Which was Falling Star.
Fallen Star, yeah.
Yeah.
You put that on your meta list.
Yeah. I again, most of my meta list was like, I enjoyed it, but not enough to read it again.
Right.
And part of the reason why it's on the meta list, that one, is because this second one was so rough
Yeah.
that I wouldn't ever tell someone to read the trilogy to get to the third one because the second one was so bad.
Yeah, you just recommend the first one.
Yeah.
And the
just
last
leave
one.
it there. But
You don't even need to read the second one. The third one kind of references what happened in the second one enough that you don't need to read it. It might be dropping some characters, but like that was pretty much it. So
Yep.
What else you got?
The next one I got on here is, well, I guess we're talking Aftermath. So the last one is Battle Scars, which is the other book I was never able to finish.
that was the one I had on my meh list.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Jedi Battle
So
Scars. Yeah.
this one, to me, my issue with it was I was looking for an action adventure novel.
Like the games.
Yeah, I like the game. That's why, because I liked the game. I wanted to go on another adventure, which was going to lead into the second game. And it wasn't an adventure. It was a romance novel. And I just lost interest.
Yeah, it turned out to be a really bad, awkward romance novel in a way. Just not very good.
I mean, if you're into romance novels, like this might be something you're into.
yeah, but The
check
Lost
it out.
Stars was a good romance novel.
This
This is just a bad romance novel.
Well, it depends on, some people prefer like different types of novels. So if you're into romance, maybe look a little deeper into it. If this one's for you, maybe check it out. But personally, as a Star Wars fan, if I were to read a romance novel, I would go with Lost Stars.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Maybe my mother will like it.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then maybe she'll want to play Jedi Fallen Order after.
Real quick, what are you guys most looking forward to in 2024 for Star Wars?
Oh, that's a good question. Blake, you go first.
It's a big question. I would say probably this High Republic thing. Like
Wave 3?
No, sorry, like
Oh, the Acolyte.
Acolyte. Yeah, I'm really curious what's gonna go on with that.
Yeah, I am
It's
too.
been-
Yeah, it's got a lot of
Man,
potential.
that's the thing. Like it's gonna set an era, and I want it to do well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited for something closer to the prequels again, because we spent a lot of time in the original trilogy era.
Yeah,
And I like the prequels as well. And that whole era to me is very interesting, and I feel like there's a lot of potential, and I want to see what they're gonna do.
yeah, yeah. I would say that too. I'm also very excited for Outlaws, the first video game not published by EA. Not that I had anything against EA. It's just they haven't really done a lot of great stuff. So, except the Jedi series, Battlefront 2. So, but I'm looking forward to that one a lot. It's gonna be cool. Published by Ubisoft. What about you, Francis?
Is the next season of Ahsoka coming out next year?
Nope. Skeleton Crew,
Oh,
Acolyte,
yes.
Bad Batch season 3, maybe.
I'm curious what they're gonna do with that one.
Next season of Bad Batch, I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah.
because the second season,
The way the second season ended, I was like,
yeah,
no, you can't end it this way.
agreed.
Yeah.
Because
Saloni.
the second season had so much filler, but the good parts were really good.
Yeah.
And so maybe they probably should have just had 2 seasons, honestly.
Well, the third one's the last. Third
yeah.
one's going to be the last.
So to me, we'll see what happens season 3. But to me, it feels like it's going to be a bit of a Hobbit trilogy issue where it feels like it could have been condensed to 2.
Yeah.
And may have been keep the good parts and just kind of
Cut the pabus.
Yeah, get to the point a little faster.
Cut the pabus.
Yeah.
The Pabu episodes. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for coming in. Thanks for chatting about some books. I feel like we put out some good recommendations and some good warnings. So this has been
random nods.
been good. It's been
nods
good.
We should do. I'm trying to remember the name. Maybe you guys can pull out the names for these novels. But
yeah.
mention to the book where Chewbacca gets crushed by a moon,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and mention to before the Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine coming back as a Force clone.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
I think what's that one like? That one's like Dark Empire or something.
Yeah, that is Dark Empire.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I forget the Chewbacca one though.
Dark Empire is that Palpatine resurrection one. The Chewbacca one, that one is, I always forget that one too. It's one of the Yuzhan Fong books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Weird book.
Mostly you using Bong. It's
Yeah.
a little different.
Weird story, but also kind of interesting. Extra Star Wars universe stuff
It gets
elsewhere.
more fantasy, which is
Yeah.
interesting because it was in that dark time period.
Yeah.
And as we saw with Ewok Adventures, both films, just kind of nature of the era is sci-fi, especially fantasy sci-fi, just leaned heavier into fantasy as time went on.
Yeah.
So it kind of became a willowy, Lord of the
Willowy.
Rings
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
in space. Yeah.
Willowy. That's something we won't get next year is Willow season 2. Rip. All right. Well, thank you guys a lot for coming on. Thanks, Francis, for coming in the Escape Pod.
Thanks for having me.
And Blake, I guess we'll, as usual, catch you in the next one.
We'll see you out there. Keep flying.
All right. Thank you all for listening. If you made it this far into the podcast, hopefully you enjoyed it. And, we just sit here and chat about Star Wars books and, went on as long as it did. So hopefully you got some good information out of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly, or the good, the bad, the ugly, however you want to look at it. Hopefully you go into 2024 with some worthy, worthwhile information there. Lots of stuff to look forward to. I mean, we already talked extensively with Kirk about, look forward into 2024, but, let us know. Let us know. Contact us down below with what you're looking forward to most about 2024. We might actually tailor kind of content based around feedback that we get as to what you're looking forward to. Maybe we'll do some build up, some what happened. It's been a while since we did what happened episodes of character lore and story, going from the beginning all the way through all their story references up until the very point that we're gonna meet up with that character again. So perhaps some of you have suggestions out there you'd like to know more about, and you can look forward to our whenever this episode drops. I don't know if this is before or after the holiday special that we're dropping a second commentary version for, but we're doing that as well. So if you haven't taken a listen to that, look for it soon, or maybe it just came out last week. But either way, this is probably the second last episode we're recording in 2023. So make sure you guys have a great Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2024. May the Force be with you.